Okay, I am with Josh Millikin, who is one of my. Now he's a grown man. I know when I had him, he was a baby Josh, and I remember coaching him all the way through. I had the honor of coaching Josh really all the way through from his seventh grade year all the way up. Of course, I got more involved with him around 10th grade. He was my quarterback for 3 years, and during that time, we had ups and we had some downs, and Josh was. So I highlighted him in the chapter of the book. We talk about grind, because when I think of guys that are willing to grind and be servants and do all the things that are required that a lot of people want to do, Josh is one of the athletes that I think of. And honored to have him on here, honored to have coached him, just honored to have been around him, and so proud of not only what he did then, but what he's doing now. So, Josh, welcome to being on here. I'm excited that you're here. Wanted to talk a little bit about kind of your experience for the people that don't know, because the book is meant to be short. And so, of course, I didn't list all the stuff we went through. So I want to give you a chance to talk a little bit about your experience through high school. Start off wherever you want to start and kind of go through your senior year, and then we'll get into some of the stuff that goes with the book.
All right. Yeah. Thanks for having me. And thanks for all the kind words. And so when I started my 10th grade year, I was always the younger kid in my class. So I think I was 15 years old when I became your starting quarterback in 10th grade. And man, I was probably like, 6 foot, 150 pounds, maybe. Yeah. With full gear on. So, so that first year was a learning curve. We always talked about getting thrown into the fire, and that was definitely what it was. And that year, it kind of burned hotter than it usually did. Rough year. It was 0-10. You kind of got the feel of like how a community is shaped around a football team. And that year, I don't know if you even remember it, but at the end of the year, we were, 0-9. We played our last game, and you said, we tried as hard as we could to play against Newport, and we fought that whole game. We came up short, of course, but they were at the top of our conference, one of the best teams in the conference, and we gave them a run for their money that they didn't expect. And you said to us, just with tears in your eyes, how proud you were, and like that's why you would continue to stay at Southside and invest in us. And I think that year, while it was hard, it shaped, our program, and it shaped, how the players and their, how they thought about you. And I think that after that year, that father-son connection kind of between, myself and you and a lot of the players was formed. And I think after that, that was the turning point in my tenure playing Southside football, and definitely the turning point for the entire program to me. After that, junior year, I believe we went 4-6, which was a huge accomplishment for our school. And then going out into my senior year, we went 8-4, went to the second round of the playoffs. And, it was very fun to be a part of that, be a part of like a culture shift.
Yeah, absolutely. And Josh, you got to give me a minute to compose myself. I remember that. I didn't remember that speech until you brought it up, but 0-10 is tough. It's tough for coaches. It's tough for players. And to me, though, that's what this chapter is about in the book, is about grinding. Sometimes you got to go through things you don't really want to go through. But I want to turn attention back to you, because that's what I've got you on here for. Talk about, your sophomore year. You're right. I had you at about 140, maybe 130, and you were just beat up, and I felt so bad for you. We couldn't for you either. All the little babies up there trying to block for the other baby at quarterback. We just were struggling. But you dedicated yourself to the weight room. So talk a little bit about what that looked like, why you chose to do it, and what kind of dedication that took.
Well, I mean, when you're – obviously that was never my goal. I love football, and, going 0-10 was not something that I wanted to, repeat ever again. And I knew that, playing quarterback, it's a position where you're a leader, where you're a guy that has to step up. And if change is going to happen, it's going to be because people follow in your footsteps. And so I knew I had to improve a lot in my game, but also to improve in that area, I was going to have to get bigger. I was going to have to get stronger. And so, in that year, you found your breaking point, you found your limitations. And I think when you find that, you realize, it's going to be tough, but the only way to go is up. And so you just got to take it one step after another. And so, yeah, it was a lot of staying. I'd come to the early workouts and stay for the one after that. And it was a lot of going on my own. It was a lot of running. It was a lot of trying to get bigger. And honestly, it was a lot of eating. That was the biggest thing for me, was nutrition. Like my dad said, if you're going to get bigger, you're going to have to eat until you're full and then eat another plate. And so by senior year, I put on quite a bit of probably unnecessary weight. I was kind of a linebacker playing quarterback at like 220. But it was the biggest I've ever been in my life. I've still yet to reach that size of weight. I'm like probably, 15, 20 pounds under that now. But it was just every day. It was being intentional with how I was eating, with how I was training.
And the word you hit there, and I want to kind of highlight, is intentional. To me, coaching athletes, you were one of the most intentional. You thought through things. You always, you wanted to do something, so you would set a plan of action and kind of work from there. That's abnormal. So coaches that are listening, you don't get a lot of these. That's why you write them in books, because they don't come around very often. So. But one of the stories that I highlighted in the book, and we won't mention the player's name just for his privacy, but I remember walking in, it was your senior year, and we had just won the biggest game at that point in our program's history. You had gotten hurt. You didn't get to play the second half of that game due to a concussion, and so you were out. And I'm cleaning up. I'm ready to go celebrate. I figure our players, man, they were dancing and they were out celebrating, and they deserved to. It was a huge win. And I walk in and I hear two voices. And so I kind of peek around, and I'm just from a distance, I remember watching you literally minister to a sophomore. It was really just a backup player, nothing super special about his ability. Our starting quarterback, who should be celebrating all the accomplishments you should be celebrating, is taking the time out of his day to talk to this kid who is really struggling with whatever issue that might be. So without giving his name or too many details, just talk about that, because I remember that impacted me so much.
Yeah, that the player was in there, and I don't even know that he knew I was in there. And he was obviously visibly upset. He was crying. And I think we live in a time now where we're presented with that opportunity to be intentional with others more than we probably even realize. And it just comes down to realizing it and taking action and showing that you care. And yeah, he was visibly upset. And so, I was probably a little concussed. And so my opportunity to celebrate was not going to be great. I had a major headache and I was taking my time to get out of there. But yeah, I think when you're a leader, taking that extreme ownership of, even the least of us matter. And especially, in the eyes of God, it doesn't matter how good we are at football. And, once we all get to heaven, none of that's going to matter at all. We're going to point to one man, and that's Jesus. And, that's going to be all that matters. And so, I just try to be I just try to show that to each and every person that I have the opportunity to do so. And in that moment, it was just I had an opportunity to be intentional with one of our guys. And, I actually ran into that guy after you had sent me that passage in the book. And I actually mentioned that to him, that scenario. And he actually told me how much that meant to him and, how much that shaped his life as he went on to graduate high school and everything. So you just got to take advantage of those opportunities while you have them.
That's exactly right. And that's to me, it's a maturity beyond your years. I remember as a coach, I was like, why am I not the one? Why didn't I even realize this was going on? But to me, it spoke to true leadership, to servant leadership, which is what the book is about. It's basically, we're trying to, as coaches, I hope, we're trying to train these guys beyond the game, and as you almost as a player coach, as a senior at that point, you were already looking beyond not just football. You hit the nail on the head where no one really cares how good you are at football 20 years down the road, 10 years down the road. God surely doesn't care. I mean, he'll use you if you'll let him, but he doesn't really care about the talent level. It's what you do with the platform. And so
Absolutely.
I kind of move as we're going that direction. Now you have graduated. I wish I could have kept you for about 19 more years, but you've moved on from me onto bigger and better. And so talk a little bit about how sports maybe have shaped, maybe some lessons you learned through some aspect of really for you, mainly football, but some aspect of sports has helped you along your journey. And of course, you're still moving that direction, but something you look back to that maybe gives you some help.
I think the biggest thing is, and obviously I wish I could still, suit up and play. But the relationships formed in sports, that's the big picture. I think that's what guys miss the most. It's certainly what I miss the most. While playing is awesome, I wish that I still, I'm still training and trying to do stuff, and I'm already getting to the point where joints are hurting and stuff. So, that comes to an end eventually, but those relationships formed, they never end. And it goes back to if you're intentional enough to keep those up. But I think it's just, I think the biggest thing is like you learn how to relate to people, especially in a sports team. And I had the opportunity to play, college football. You're going to run into a lot of situations, a lot of people that are dealing with different stuff than you are. That was even very noticeable at Southside. And so I think a lot of like what we're seeing in the world today, people not understanding other people's points of view, where they're coming from. Sports has a great way of teaching us humility, of teaching us how to relate to others, and just kind of how to love each other. A lot of sports, as you go through fall camp or whatever, summer training. I know at Southside we had a pretty intense summer training. You're kind of struggling with each other, and that's good and it's fun. But at the same time, it's work, and you learn how to work with others. You learn how to, build unity. And I think that's an important thing that's probably lost in our culture today.
Absolutely. To me, that's what's going on right now. If they would just let athletes and coaches take over, I think we could get rid of a lot of this, because I think we understand you've got to work together, not tear each other apart. And so that was very well said, Josh. And the relationships part, I think, is the big deal, that you're going to take the rest of your life. Obviously, I'm going to take the rest of my life. And so the last thing I've got for you is to talk to you. Got hopefully coaches are going to, get this book and look through it, and they're going to read your story, possibly some athletes as well, but mainly it's geared towards coaches of every sport. So what kind of advice would you give them of, hey, this is something that maybe was good, or this is something you need to stay away from as you're trying to reach your athletes? You're trying to teach them to be servant leaders. You're trying to teach them to grind. You're trying to teach them to do things they may not want to do. How do you encourage them beyond just their sport?
I was actually in a car. I'm interning at West Baptist, and you actually have the opportunity to coach the son of the pastor at that church right now. And he asked me, he said, what do you think of Coach Simpson? This was just a conversation. We were talking about football. And I said, I love him, obviously. He was my favorite coach I've ever had. And he asked me why. And I said, it was so interesting, our relationship, because, I was a guy that we would game plan for hours on a Thursday afternoon. I spent a lot of time with his family, going over to his house. So we had definitely a different relationship. But just, I think we go through life in each stage kind of searching for a father figure and someone to guide us, someone to look up to. And, I think that you modeled that certainly, with me, because I was your quarterback and we spent a lot of time together. But I don't think that a guy that I've talked to since would say that, Coach Simpson wasn't like a father figure to me. He wasn't a guy that, he's tired, he's got a family to head back to, but he didn't take time to worry about my situation. He wasn't, not taking the time to be intentional with me, starter, not starter, you took that time. And so I think that we run on a schedule where it's kind of like, I've got to get to this next. I've got to get this accomplished, coaching. I've got to go home, mow my yard. I've got to, get home, and I've got to be a father to my own children. But I think, once we get in a routine of taking time for others, I think that's a big thing. I think we all think we're a lot busier than we actually are. And so just taking the time to slow down and realize, the blessing and the opportunity that you have around you.
Yeah. Well, man, Josh, give me just a second, but man, I appreciated you obviously. And of course we're still going to be close throughout, because that's been one of the goals of the book, is to hopefully encourage these coaches to recognize the impact they may have. And I'm at the point now, old enough, where guys like you are mature enough to be able to come back and say things like that. But a lot of these younger coaches that are listening, hopefully you get something. And there are going to be a lot of guys you deal with as you coach. Some of them are going to be easy, like the guy I'm with right now. Some of them may not be easy, but just recognize that the impact you leave, like the impact Josh left on that young man in the locker room, that was a 20-minute conversation that maybe changed that kid's life. And so just recognize the power and the platform you have. And Josh, I really want to thank you for coming on and sharing your story and letting me write about your story. I was honored to do so. I'm going to go ahead and stop the recording here and